Alpha King chose another woman over his Luna. She vanished. Years later, she returned. Elara Voss never asked for much. She never demanded attention, never pushed herself to the front of any room, and never raised her voice to be heard. She simply existed, quietly, steadily, like a candle that burns without flickering, even when the wind moves around it. She had grown up on the outer edges of the Blackwood territory, far from the grand halls where important decisions were made and powerful names were spoken. Her family had no special rank. They were not wealthy, not connected, not remarkable in any way that the world tends to reward. But Elara had a gift, a deep, natural ability to heal, and those who truly needed help always seemed to find their way to her door. She had known Darius Blackwood long before he became a king. She had watched him grow from a serious, broad-shouldered boy into the kind of man who filled every room he walked into, not because he tried to, but because something about him simply commanded space. She had never allowed herself to dwell on those feelings. People like her, she had quietly decided, did not get people like him. Then, on the morning of her 18th birthday, everything changed. The bond arrived like the first light of dawn, slow at first, then suddenly, completely present. It was not a dramatic sensation. It was more like remembering something she had always known, a warmth that settled in her chest and stayed there, calm and certain and impossible to ignore. Darius came to her that same evening. He stood at the edge of her family's small property, his expression more open than she had ever seen it, and he held out his hands. "You felt it too," he said. It was not a question. She looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," she said simply. He took her hands in his, and he said the words that she would carry with her for years afterward, long after everything between them had changed. "You are my Luna. I know it. I have always known it." She believed him. Of course she did. Why wouldn't she? For 8 months, she lived inside that belief. She sat beside him at pack gatherings. She learned the names of every family in the territory, the grandmothers, the children, the quiet men who worked the outer fields. She helped where she could. She listened more than she spoke. She poured herself into the life that was slowly taking shape around her. And she did so with the kind of quiet devotion that only a person who truly loves something is capable of. Darius never formally crowned her. He always said the timing wasn't right, that soon they would make it official, that things were complicated right now with the political situation. She accepted each explanation. She told herself that patience was a form of love too. She was still telling herself that on the frost-covered morning, when she stood at the back of the great hall and listened to Darius announce that he would be taking Seraphine Caine as his Luna Queen. Seraphine Caine, daughter of the Eastern Coalition's most powerful alpha family. Beautiful, elegant, and politically perfect in every way that Elara was not. The alliance between their families would expand the Blackwood territory, secure trade agreements, and position Darius as the most powerful alpha king in a generation. Darius delivered the announcement in a clear, steady voice. He used words like duty and responsibility and the good of the pack. He never once looked in Elara's direction. The hall was full of people. Not one of them looked at her either. Or perhaps more accurately, they all looked at her once, quickly, and then looked away. It is a particular kind of cruelty, the way people avoid the eyes of someone who is publicly hurting, as though not acknowledging the wound somehow makes them innocent of witnessing it. Elara did not cry in that hall. She stood straight. She breathed evenly. She waited until the crowd began to move and talk and congratulate, and then she slipped through a side door and walked across the frozen grounds until she reached the tree line. There, alone among the bare winter trees, she sat down in the snow and let the grief come. It did not come in tears, though the tears came too eventually. It came first as a physical thing, a heaviness in her chest, a pressure behind her eyes, a ringing in her ears that slowly faded into silence. She pressed both hands flat against the frozen ground, as if the earth might steady her. After a while, it did. She sat there for a long time. When she finally stood, something had shifted inside her. Not healed, that would take years, but settled, in the way that a decision settles once you have finally made it. That night, she packed one bag. She moved quietly through the small room she shared with her younger sister Marin, folding things carefully, making no noise. Before she left, she wrote a single note and placed it on Marin's pillow. "Don't look for me. I'm not broken. I'm just done." By the time the sun came up, she was already gone. The city of Calmir was nothing like Blackwood territory. It was loud where Blackwood was quiet, crowded where Blackwood was open, and entirely indifferent in a way that Elara, surprisingly, found to be a relief. Nobody in Calmir knew who she was. Nobody looked at her with pity or guilt or the particular awkwardness of people who had witnessed something they wished they hadn't. She was simply a young woman with a bag and a skill, and nowhere specific to be. She found work quickly. A physician named Dr. Sable ran a small clinic in the quieter part of the city. A careful, precise woman who treated rogues and lone wolves, and people who had fallen through the cracks of the formal pack system. She asked Elara 2 questions during what passed for an interview. Can you stay calm when things are difficult? And can you learn without needing to be the smartest person in the room? Elara answered yes to both. She was telling the truth. The years in Calmir were hard, in the way that good things are often hard, demanding, exhausting, and quietly, gradually transforming. Elara studied. She read everything Dr. Sable put in front of her. She made mistakes and corrected them without drama. She sat with patients who had no one else, and learned, over time, that listening was itself a form of medicine. Within 2 years, she was trusted to handle cases on her own. Within 4 years, she had opened her own clinic, a small, clean space that she funded herself, staffed with 3 people she had trained personally. The clinic served rogues, lone wolves, and families who had left difficult situations with nowhere else to turn. People began to call her the Silver Healer. Nobody knew her real name. A rogue named Finn became her closest friend. He was large, quiet, and entirely uncurious about other people's pasts, which made him the ideal person to share a workplace with. He handled the practical side of the clinic, supplies, security, scheduling, while Elara handled everything that required patience and a steady hand. She did not think about Darius often. When she did, it was the way you think about a road you once took and will not take again, with a kind of detached acknowledgement, not longing. She had cried every last tear for that chapter of her life in those first difficult months. After that, she had simply moved forward. She was not happy in the soft, uncomplicated way she had once imagined happiness. She was something quieter and more durable than that. She was whole. Back in Blackwood territory, things were not going the way Darius had planned. The alliance with the Caine family had delivered everything it had promised: expanded borders, political protection, increased resources. On paper, the Blackwood pack had never been stronger, but something underneath the surface was wrong, and it was the kind of wrong that cannot be fixed by adding more resources. A pack is not a political arrangement, it is a living thing, and at the center of every healthy pack is a bond between the alpha and his true Luna that radiates outward like warmth from a fire, keeping the whole structure steady. Seraphine was capable and sharp and not unkind, but she was not the one. The pack felt it in ways they could not fully explain. A restlessness that settled over the territory in the evenings. Children who woke crying without knowing why. Betas who grew short-tempered with each other. Elders who sat quietly and said very little. Elder Cato said something in the 5th year of the marriage. He came to Darius in private, which was itself unusual, and spoke in the plain, careful way that very old people sometimes speak when they have decided that politeness has run its course. The bond you walked away from did not simply disappear, the elder said. It remains. And the pack breathes around the absence of it, the way a body breathes around an old wound, carefully, and not quite right. Darius thanked him politely, and said nothing useful in return. But he heard it. He heard it the way you hear something you already know, and have been refusing to look directly at. It landed somewhere deep, and stayed there. By the 7th year, the unease had deepened into something the pack's healers called a drifting sickness. Not a disease exactly, but a gradual dimming of the energy that holds a community together. It moved through the outer ring families first. Children fell into long, listless sleeps. Older wolves grew distant and forgetful. The outer ring, which had always been the quietest and most self-sufficient part of the territory, began to feel genuinely lost. Seraphine tried. She was not a villain in this story, only someone who had been placed in a role that was never truly hers, and who had done her best with it for longer than anyone could reasonably have asked. She knew, she had always known, somewhere beneath the discipline and the duty, that the pack's difficulty was connected to something she could not fix, simply by trying harder. She told Darius this. He listened in silence. He was beginning, in the slow and uncomfortable way that proud people eventually understand painful truths, to see exactly what he had done and what it had cost. It was not fate that brought Elara back. It was a child. A 9-year-old girl from the outer ring of the Blackwood pack arrived at Elara's clinic in Calmir one rainy afternoon, brought by her mother, a woman who had quietly left the territory 2 years earlier. The girl was deeply unwell. Her symptoms were unlike anything straightforwardly physical. She drifted in and out of awareness. She called for people who were not in the room. Elara recognized it immediately. She had been researching this kind of sickness for years, the kind that wove itself into the pack bond itself, and could not be treated with ordinary medicine alone. She worked through the night. By morning, the girl was breathing easily, sleeping peacefully, with color returning to her face. When the mother thanked her, trembling with relief, she told Elara where they had come from. She described the outer ring. She described the spreading tiredness, the lost children, the quiet wrongness that had settled over the whole territory. Elara was quiet for a long time. Then she told Finn she would be back within a week. She packed her medical bag. She put on her coat. She crossed back into Blackwood territory for the first time in 7 years. She did not come back for Darius. She did not come back for the life she had once imagined. She came because she was a healer, and there were people who needed healing, and she was perhaps the only person capable of providing it. That was all. That was enough. Word moved through the pack the way words do, faster than it should, reaching every corner of the territory before she had finished treating her third family. Darius came to her on the second evening. He stood in the doorway of a simple wooden home, dressed plainly, without guards or ceremony, watching her finish wrapping a bandage on an elderly man's arm. She did not hurry. She completed her work, spoke quietly to the man's daughter, and then turned to face him. He looked older, not broken. Darius was not the type to break easily, but there was something in his expression that had not been there 7 years ago, something softer around the edges, like stone that has been weathered long enough to lose its sharpness. "Elara," he said. "Alpha," she replied. The conversation that followed was not dramatic. It was, in some ways, too quiet for the size of what had happened between them. He told her about the pack. She told him she had already seen it with her own eyes. He told her he was sorry. She listened all the way through without hurrying him or letting him off easily. "I chose wrong," he said finally. "I knew it the morning I made that announcement. I chose what looked like strength, and I left behind something real. I have thought about that every single day." She looked at him steadily. "I know," she said. "I could feel it, even from Calmir." He nodded slowly. "Is there anything left?" he asked. "Anything at all?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know yet," she said honestly, "but I know who I am now. I know what I built. I know what I am worth. If anything begins again between us, it begins between equals. That is not a condition I am willing to move on." "Equals," he said, without hesitation. "Whatever you need, however long it takes." Elara stayed for 3 weeks. Then 3 months. She worked from the outer ring inward, treating families, sitting with children, quietly anchoring the pack in ways that had nothing to do with title or ceremony. The territory responded the way it had always needed to, gradually, organically, the restlessness lifting like fog in the morning sun. Seraphine came to see her on the 4th week. She sat across a plain wooden table and spoke without pretense. "I always knew I was not right for this," she said. "Watching you work, I understand it now. I think I have always understood it." Elara poured 2 cups of tea and said, simply, "That must have been a very lonely thing to know." Seraphine looked at her for a moment. Then she laughed. Just once, briefly, but genuinely. "It was," she admitted. Their separation was handled quietly, with dignity on both sides. Darius came to Elara one final time, alone. in an open meadow at the edge of the territory, at the end of a warm spring evening. There were no speeches. He simply stood before her and told her the complete truth, holding nothing back, asking for nothing except to be heard. She heard him, all of it. And then, because she was Elara Voss, who had survived loss and built something lasting from the wreckage, who had spent 7 years becoming someone she was genuinely proud of, she made a choice. Not because she needed him, not because the bond left her no other option, but because, with clear eyes and a whole heart, she chose to. That, as it turned out, made all the difference.